Well, welcome to you again. I hope that you join us regularly, but lovely to have you with us if you are joining us. Today, I'm going to be dealing with judgments. And the last time I did it last week, I finished the recording. I gave it to Lauren, my sister, who normally does the editing. And boy, the sound was frightful. So we've tested the sound. We've done quite a few things. And I do believe that we are now running with the sound correctly. So to each of you, welcome to you. You may notice I'm wearing a nice warm jacket. Port Elizabeth is freezing at the moment. I've got a heater on and it makes no difference. So I've put my new motorbike jacket on. When I had my accident, I unfortunately destroyed my helmet and my jacket from the accident. And very gratefully so, my insurance gave me the funds to purchase another one. So just for warmth, forgive me for wearing my jacket, but it is the warmest one I've got. It's designed to carry me in the cold when I'm riding on the road. And I ride very slowly, I promise you. Anyway, we are talking about judgment. Now, let me just intro judgment and say to you that judgment is a very fascinating thing. When we say judgment, it's got a negative connotation. It's seen as a word you should never use as a Christian. But when I researched this, what a beautiful, beautiful opportunity I had of looking at God's judgments and how precious and powerful they are. Because if we're going to do what pleases God, if we're going to do what doesn't harm others, if we're going to do what pleases the people around us and builds them up, we are making a judgment against doing what is wrong so that we do right. So it's not a judgment. There are judgments, which is to punish or to hurt or to respond. But amazingly, God's judgments are actually things where he says, this is my way, that's not my way, but because I love you, I'm inviting you to do what is right. Even if you do what is wrong, you will never stop my love for you because that's my choice, but you will walk a better life. You'll walk a much easier life and most certainly a much less bitter life than you could ever imagine. And I'm going to be dealing with that today. And I love the subject. So let me get into it. First of all is our screen that you may well know, and that is the one that is our general screen, and that is the one that I have put up here, and that is the Sunday Bible service on a Sunday, the Wednesday evening Bible study, which is what this is, and I'm dealing with a subject that in actual fact is a subject that most people need to know. And if you look at the screen, my name is Paul Weiss. Some have said it's not the best surname for a minister, but it's a surname and it does me. Weiss Squad, Miami Vice. You'll know what I'm talking about if you pick up on that. My phone number, 082-473-0041. Let me say that again slowly. 082-473-0041. My email, paul@gracenow.co.za. And if you're watching this, you can come back to it for Lauren's details. Either one of us will do. We'll pass it on to each other. But I'm sharing this with you for the simple reason that should you need to get hold of us, we absolutely love questions. Now, many churches and pastors, they say, don't question me. I'm God's anointed. Don't even let that guy finish the sentence. Get out of there. And I'll tell you what, get into somewhere where you can ask questions, because we learned everything by asking mom and dad when we were 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 years old. Mommy, what you doing? Daddy, what's that? Why are you doing that? Etc., etc. So life is built on questions. And if God designed us that way to learn, let me tell you, he didn't stop it with the scriptures. So asking questions, but sadly, many pastors, many elders, deacons, whatever, are nowhere near as equipped on the simplicity of what I call rightly dividing the scriptures and the dispensation. So let's continue. What I want to do is get on with the aspect of the topic we're doing, and that is judgment. And I must tell you that there is certainly something I want to do first, and that is that in order to work through things, can I tell you that a concordance is a book that has every word in the Bible listed in a place that it's used, so you can take a word like judgment and you can look through the whole Bible and find out where it's used. Now, there's a lot of times judgment or judging or judge is used, but Do you know, and this is most fascinating, that the Bible is its own dictionary in the sense that when it uses a biblical word, the first time it uses it on what they call first occurrence, normally it will give a description of that. Now, if you want to use your concordance and do an exercise, then look up the word the Most High. And you know what you're going to find? You're going to find that the Most High, it says the possessor of heaven and earth. In other words, the Most High is God. And what does God do? He owns the heaven and the earth. He's the possessor of the heaven and the earth. So it gives its own meaning. Anyway, it gives you a great feeling of the word and the principle, etc. But I want to say as we commence, and I'll throw that in there, if you don't have a concordance but you have a laptop, then one of the most astounding programs you can download, which is just a very good but general, it has the King James Bible on it. It has the King James Bible plus the Greek, and that is eSword, which is an electronic free download. So if you don't have it, try get it loaded. It's a beautiful tool to use to search the scriptures. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what eSword looks like. So please understand, I'm taking a bit of time for this, but I'm going to get into what we're dealing with pretty soon. So this is eSword, and I'll show you how it works. And that is that eSword is actually something that is a Bible program. Now I've got it, there's a search. You can see I searched for the word enemy, and it's highlighted there. Now, how you get to use it will be of necessity that you spend that time. But in this case, I've chosen Paul's letters. I'm searching for all the words that I entered, and I entered enemy. And you know what happens? It'll tell you where the words are used, etc., etc. I was looking for Romans 12:20, and we're going to come to that just now. But then it's also got settings. I hope you can see the mouse. It's, if you look at the top and follow it, you can also put it, and it's got a B, a C, a D, and an E. Now that stands for the Bible. If you press the B, it'll just give you the Bible. I'm going to get rid of my search here. But you'll see that on it, you've got a little thing like that, is a search, but you can use Control S as a shortcut. So you've got a Bible that you can put on. You've got the concordance, and there's the concordance. And also, sometimes you can get commentaries there as well. Then you've got the dictionaries, and you'll see that if you use a word, it'll come up under these different people who have listed it. And the Webster is one of the best. It's the old Webster dictionary. Very, very lovely tool to use. This is on Strong's Concordance, and that's why he uses numbers. You'll see that I'm using the mouse while it's thinking. But there's the Webster Dictionary, and you can take a word, the name of a person in the Bible. It doesn't matter what it is. Let's look for a word here, and I'm going to use the word, okay, Abash. And then it'll tell you Abash, the Hebrew. It'll give you a pronunciation or something, to be confounded or ashamed. And then it says to make the spirits to fall, to cast down the countenance, to make ashamed, to confuse or confound, as by exiting suddenly a consciousness of guilt, error, inferiority, etc. But then when you press this one here, and again, my mouse, you follow my mouse, I press that one, and it'll give me the editors, which is the E there, editorial program. It'll give you the Bibles. And when I say Bibles, I only use King James Bible in these, the King James Plus, which gives you a Greek reference. So if you just move your mouse over it, it'll give you that. And then it's got the dictionaries, which is what the D stands for, and then the editors. And of course, the C is, you can also add that to this panel, and that is commentary. So it comes out like that, and if you press on it, it'll come out, and you press that corner, and then it'll drop the commentaries and the editing and the dictionaries and the Bible readings there. And you can always just go to that one, or you can choose whatever you want. Now I'm going to take something like this Exodus 18:11. If I highlight on it, I can right click, copy verses, copy them, and then I can drop them into the editorial or put them on a Word document. And I know that I'm actually working through something just to give you a bit of insight. So please forgive me for doing that. But I did want to give you that because your reading of the scriptures is so beautiful when you start to understand the words, understand the context, understand, and it starts with, and I'm going to say something here that I don't want you to forget. You start on the bigger picture and you narrow it down to the detail. You don't start with the detail. You can and take it upwards, but let me tell you what I'm talking about. If you were reading something about Adam and Eve, the bigger picture would be the whole Bible is written. This was the beginning of the Bible. It was before they had sinned, and therefore the things said to them we can't fulfill because we're not in a perfect Garden of Eden. So the bigger picture gives you where it's written, why it's written, who it's written to, what it's written for, and the outcome of that will give you the period where God dispensed truth before he had to dispense a message of how to regain a relationship with him after Adam and Eve sinned. Um, I hope that you're following me. Forgive me if I put a bit of vastish information in. Many of you know exactly what I'm talking about because I know that many of our members or our folks that come to our church, we don't have membership. We're members of the body of Christ. But those who do know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you don't, please make it something you get stuck into. Not only because you want to know the word of God, but listen to what I'm going to say now. Because you don't want to be at the mercy of a bad teacher who's going to give you bad teaching and doctrine, and you live your whole life. And you cannot say to the Lord when we get home, well, you know what? I didn't tell my kids that because I didn't know it. But please, can you send me back? No, not how it works. I'm sure you're with me, and I just wanted to touch on that. And as we go through this, please enjoy the study. My research I loved. So here we go. Okay. We love judgment and find it unfair if a criminal gets off. Have you ever heard of a criminal? Now, in South Africa, many folks never really fancied Jacob Zuma because of the corruption and what they called a combination of the Guptas, which were Indian people, and the corruption that went on. So, how can we want justice if we don't expect God to have justice? And if he has justice, he judges between good and bad, right and wrong. But he judges the heart in knowing what we think as well. So, like many things, the word judge brings from us an emotional response often before it brings any logical basis, any reasoning, any evaluation of facts and assessment of facts, and hence arguments instead of discussion pursue. Now, again, I want to say something to you that relates to your relationships, your family, whatever it is. And that is one of the greatest lessons you can learn is if someone makes an accusation against you, do not respond with an accusation against them, and don't even necessarily respond with a defense. What you do is you take that ball, throw it into their court, and all you have to say is, excuse me, where did you hear that? Or what makes you think that's what I think? And I promise you, they then have got to explain to you, and suddenly they the focus, not you. And if you are wrong, I love the fact. And let me say something here that is absolutely fundamental. The people who have corrected me, who have told me that I'm wrong, who have shown me a right way, they are greater people and friends than anyone who pats me on the back and doesn't correct me. Now, in life, there are many things where I am corrected, and I'll give you an example. And forgive me for throwing these things in, but they're very significant. And that is that when I counsel a couple, I will listen to the man, the wife, whatever, the child, the teenager, and the parent. And you know, when I hear them talking, I learn the way that the thinking is, and very often it's a reflection of the way society is thinking, which is important to me because I can then assess, well, hang on, what is God's thought? God's judgment of something wrong is not punishment because he punished Christ. God's judgment of something wrong is, hey, there's a better way. Don't do it that way because you're going to sink yourself first. And that's what judgment is. And I'm going to share that with you today of the verses and how the Lord dealt with us in the Old Testament and how beautiful it was for God's people, the nation of Israel, that they had right judgments. And as a nation, they began to multiply, to prosper, etc., etc. So we're going to touch on that. And that is that as we do, let me tell you that amongst the things we need to understand that. Now, many people have been rejected by Christians because their behavior is judged. Now, let me tell you, we do not judge a person's behavior on behalf of God to tell them how bad they are. People say, yeah, but you do this, forgive the examples, you speak, and that's not a Christian thing to do, and God will judge you, and you not, you know what, if a person doesn't understand the gospel, and I can say this because I was a smoker, and let me tell you, I'm very grateful that I understand things because I did them, but I don't encourage anyone else to do them. But at that stage, I didn't believe in Christ and know him at all. But many people will not want to be a Christian because if you serve a God that's going to judge me or punish me, then you know what? I don't want to know him. But God's judgment is based on love, not on judgment of badness. So many people do not believe in Christian thinking because they have had the system of the church, the constitution, the thinking of a religious organization, not the Bible teaching of how powerful and beautiful God's grace is. And I hope that makes sense. So they were judged, not their belief wasn't corrected, and they were not taught the truth that they can trust. Now, what is judgment? And this is a big subject, so we're going to do it over a few weeks. Judgment is simply a verdict that is either favorable or unfavorable. When I'm speeding down the road on my motorbike, which I've never done that I know of. Now, I hope that you're a good judge because you'd say, Paul, you're talking nonsense. But I ride super bikes that I get on demo to maybe organize a run. And I must say, when I tell people I stick to the speed limit, you be the judge, you make the judgment. It's a technology that's beautiful, but needs to be applied safely. And that is sometimes it's nice to wind that throttle on a little bit. Judgment is simply a verdict either favorable or unfavorable. So when you judge something, can I give you a very simple but a very profound thing? When you pick up an orange and it's got mold on it, you judge it as either being fresh or not being fresh. The same is true when you pick up a tomato. Have you ever been to the fridge? I, in fact, did it. I bought a lovely packet of tomatoes, 2 kilograms the other day at Checkers. And you know what happened? I went to them in the fridge and I'd put them underneath everything. And when I took them out, there was mold on them. I made a judgment. These are not fresh and they are not edible. Now, that is a judgment. It's a verdict on whether it is approved or it's not approved, whether it's verified or not verified. So what I'm saying is that is God's judgment. But God has a judgment which is punishment, which he doesn't apply to us as Christians, and he doesn't apply to the non-believer until he stands before him in what is known as the great white throne judgment, where the non-believer will be judged for his wrongdoing because he hasn't had the forgiveness of Christ, which he's received. God doesn't want to judge him. If you're a non-believer and you think God is waiting to judge you because he doesn't care about you, absolute rubbish. He is not judging your performance because you need to make a decision. And if you should trust him, you are not trusting him to get rid of the judgment of your sin. You are trusting him because you've discovered how much he loves you, that he gave his son in your and my place that we would be free. So let me say that that's what judgment comes down to in a little bit of a different way. But let's get back to those scriptures. And what I want to do is get back to them. And it says, and I want to chat to you about two things that I find most phenomenal. Can you, if you're listening to this and watching it, you will see the words rewards and salvation are the most astounding examples of judgment. Now, this is most fascinating to me. In fact, I might even wind up with this to a point, but can I tell you, rewards and salvation. Now, here is a crazy, crazy thing, but the way we think it, we're not aware of how unwise it is how we think. Let me give you this example. If you have a situation where someone has been in this world for 75 years. They've been bad people. They've lived any way they wanted. They've been unkind to people, whatever it is. There's a lot of things. They're 75. They're on their deathbed. They've been diagnosed with cancer. And along comes a minister like myself to visit them. And as I speak to them, I share with them God's grace, that God's not interested in what you've done wrong for all these years. He's interested in forgiving those things so you can enter heaven and be with him, and you will be perfect the day you close your eyes and take your last breath and enter heaven. And that is not because you change and you do good things. Yeah, let me say that again. It's not because you change and try to do good things. It's because you realize how many bad things you've done and you trust Christ dying in your place when he took God's judgment and justice and punishment and what the Bible calls wrath on him rather than on you. But if you ignore it and you don't receive it, he can't give you that gift. But should you receive it, you enter into heaven the moment you take that last breath, whether it's a day from now, whether it's 30 days from now, and some of you, whether it's 70, 80 years from now, because maybe you're very young. The point that I want to make, though, is this, and that is that what we're talking about is God's judgment, but how we think about judgment. Now, do you know what I've had many, 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 many times? When you stop and you think about it, it's hard to believe, is that I have people who will say to me, but that's not fair. He lived 75 years. He was a bad person. I know him. He was unkind. He was destructive. He was greedy. He was, you name it. And you know what they say? That's not fair, because I've been a Christian and I've treated people well my whole life. Now, he's been bad his whole life. He believes, trusts Christ, and he's saved. That's not fair. No, stop and think about that. Do you know what's fascinating? Is it isn't fair in the way we see it. But you know, the person who argues that is saying, I've served the Lord for 40 years. And what he's actually trying to imply is it's been a waste of time. I should have just lived until my last breath and then trusted Christ. No, the Christian life. And you know what? If you're living the right Christian life, I will make you a promise, a guaranteed promise. And you know what that is? If you live a life where you honor Christ and you love him for his dying on our behalf, being buried, and rising again to tell us there's life after life, that 2,000 years on, you can prove it from factual evidence, then let me tell you, you've never wasted a minute. You've saved yourself many a pain, many a struggle, many a hardship, because he guided, he led us. His Holy Spirit within dwells us and teaches us his ways, which are his judgments on how to live the best life. Make sense? Now, what I want to say to you is that I'm going to wind up for today, but what I have said is the introduction and the beginning of the things that lie ahead in what I want to share with you. And I haven't got to covering the nation of Israel from Genesis, and particularly how God began to deal with the nation in his judgments for them. Yeah, his judgments for them, not his judgments against them, where they were equipped and enlightened and inspired and motivated to live for the things that were right that he told them. So having said that, I hope you look forward to the next talk, and I certainly am very excited about sharing it. And let me tell you, when I share it, And I want to tell you this. When you share the gospel and you share the word and you prepare for it, I promise you, the riches, the bubbling over of your heart for the glorious way that God should work in our lives. And he says, I'll give you my wisdom. Now, his wisdom is not the world's wisdom. It's not necessarily impressive to the non-believer, but you know that you're living with the right reasons behind the very breath you take. I hope that you're finding that. And if you're not, please don't leave it. You're robbing yourself of the peace, the joy, the love, the grace God can work. So, might I say to you as I conclude today, in this very cold city called Port Elizabeth today in South Africa, may the Lord lead you as you go through some of these things. Get yourself a King James Bible, a concordance. If you've got a computer, get an eSword program and begin to search and discover. And amongst other things, I will just touch on the next time I speak to you again, dispensationally understanding the Bible, so you don't take an insight for the Jews and try and apply it and it doesn't work. Many people don't go to church because they were told things that are not true. The Lord bless you and thank you for listening.